Hey guys, what's up? This is Frank from MTG Unlimited, and today I got a Sharuum the Hegemon EDH deck tech for you guys. So as you can see, I have almost the entire deck laid out here. I've kind of separated into separate categories and certain combos that work well. And as you can see in the middle, I have basically three of the most important cards in the deck. Sharuum, Museo, and Mindslaver. So, obviously Sharuum the Hegemon is used to basically reanimate all your artifacts and bring them back, especially the ones like Mindslaver that you have to sacrifice in order to activate their ability. She's very helpful for those instances, and she just combos with a lot of cards that makes for a great artifact deck overall. So I'll start up here with kind of the removal area. Up here you can see all the removal spells I have. Banishing Light, Swords to Plowshares, Path to Exile, O-Ring, and Eye of Doom. These are kind of just spot removal cards that I'll use on any permanents that I need to get rid of kind of right away. I think they're all good options for you. I think they're all great no matter what they are. So, Eye of Doom is kind of a fun card just because it's a very multiplayer type card that you would really only play in EDH because each player chooses a non-land permanent that is sacrificed. So that's kind of always fun in EDH to do that, especially in multiplayer. And then over here I have all the board wipes here. You can see Day of Judgment, Merciless Eviction, Terminus, Planar Cleansing, Supreme Verdict, and Neverinel's Disc. Not really sure how to pronounce that last one, but we'll go with that. So kind of just standard board wipes. Terminus is obviously really good in Commander, especially when you're facing decks like Kalia or Rafiq, where you need to get rid of their commander as soon as possible. Supreme Verdict obviously can't be countered. Planar Cleansing and Neverinel's Disc pretty much destroy everything on the board. And Merciless Eviction, you can choose whatever is posing the most threat. And then Day of Judgment just takes out all creatures. So pretty standard board wipes that you're going to want to use, especially when playing aggressive decks, like I said. And then down here, I have all the counter spells. So as you can see, Essence Scatter. This isn't really a counterspell, but Perplexing Chimera. It's mostly just played in Commander just to kind of throw off the game state, kind of make people hesitate to play their big spells that really affect the game and really help them win, because you could easily just steal those from them. So that's always a fun card to play in multiplayer. And then you can see Cancel, Stifle, Arcane Denial, Redirect, Spelljack, and Counterspell. Kind of just standard counterspells. Arcane Denial is obviously very good just because it's only 2 mana, one of which is colorless. Same with Counterspell, except they're both islands. Spelljack is a lot of mana, but it's really good, especially if you like leave all that mana open or if you're using artifacts to generate mana. It's very good because you exile that card first of all, and then you can play it without playing its mana cost. So basically you steal whatever they're about to play. And then, yeah, that's pretty much it for the counterspells. So then I'll move up here to Omniscience and Tempered Steel, the two enchantments that are most played in the deck. And Omniscience, obviously, win condition basically in of itself. If you can resolve Omniscience, especially with the amount of cards that you can draw in this deck, Omniscience is just absolutely insane. You kind of just spit out everything in your hand, get all your Sphinxes, all your Angels out, everything, and just sort of combo off with things on the board and basically just swing for tons of damage and do certain combos that really work well with this deck. Omniscience obviously hardly ever resolves, and it's kind of difficult to get out, but it's always fun if you do get it out. And then Tempered Steel, artifact creatures you control get +2/+2, so obviously you can tell why that's in here since this is an artifact deck. I'll move on to the walkers. So Venser, first of all, there's a lot of combos with Venser. I really like using him. He has great synergy with Sharuum, because you can just exile Sharuum with Venser, and then basically just flickers it during your turn, and you can bounce more artifacts back, and it gives you more options for getting artifacts back instead of just casting Sharuum once in a game and getting artifacts back. It really lets you flicker her very well. And then obviously Tezzeret is a great planeswalker for all artifact decks. He lets you tutor up artifacts, untap artifacts, or turn all your artifacts into 5/5 creatures. All of his abilities are absolutely fantastic in this deck, especially with the amount of artifacts that we have. And then I like to play Jace Beleren in this deck. Not a lot of people do, but I just like him because it kind of he obviously for the draw power alone, but he also allows each player to draw, so that kind of makes it so you don't really make enemies. And then Liliana Vess, I just play so that I can tutor up cards that I need in order to combo. Things like Venzer that I would use with Sharuum. And I'll talk about Museo real quick. I was thinking about turning this into a mono blue artifact deck actually because of this card. It's absolutely fantastic. Basically, especially if you have like Mindslaver or basically any of these Sphinxes over here that are 7 or 8 mana, it's absolutely fantastic. You just pay 4 mana, tap it, and then you look at the top X cards, where X is the highest mana cost of artifacts you control, and you can put an artifact from among them into play without playing its mana cost. Not a ton to say about that. It's just a great ability overall. It's very synergistic with the deck, and it enables you to get out like these giant creatures over here. Things like Enigma Sphinx, where you can cascade into other artifacts. Master of Ethereum, which is almost always huge. Send Triplets is obviously a fun card to throw people off, throw the game state off, and just give you more card advantage over your enemies. Magister Sphinx obviously is a win condition in of itself to make a player's life total 10. It's a very mean card. So you can get out any of these artifacts that help you ramp into things, or like Darksteel Forge or something like that. It basically just gets whatever artifacts you want out with only 4 mana, so that's great. And then Mindslaver, obviously, just flicker it with Sharuum. Try to do that as many times as possible to control the player with the biggest threat. Just control their turn. Make it so they really can't do anything and kind of screw them over in the process. That's a very mean card as well. And then these are kind of just cards that enable you to kind of draw, get card advantage. Mindspring, you 2 mana and X, you draw X cards. Factor Fiction and Brainstorm, I'm sure all of you are familiar with. And then Sphinx of Uthun is basically a Factor Fiction in a creature. When it ETBs, you just Factor Fiction essentially. And then over here is kind of some combos that I really like. Consecrated Sphinx is just a great card, especially if someone else already has a Consecrated Sphinx out. You can just trigger off their draw triggers and just draw tons and tons and tons of cards. Just gives you lots of answers and things like that. But it also combos very well with Psychosis Crawler. Psychosis Crawler over here, it basically says that its power and toughness are equal to the cards in your hand, and whenever you draw a card, each opponent loses 1 life. So, in combination with things like Consecrated Sphinx, it's ridiculous, because obviously you're drawing like tons of cards per turn, and they're losing tons of life, and your opponents need to find an answer to it quickly before it gets out of hand. You can just draw like ridiculous amounts of cards with that combo. And then obviously like Temple Bell and Unwinding Clock works to draw like even more cards per turn. Temple Bell just says tap and each player draws a card. Unwinding Clock also works really well with these artifacts that I'll talk about now, that I just use to like kind of ramp, get more mana out quickly. Things like Chromatic Lantern, Gilded Lotus, Ethereum Sculptor, which makes all artifact spells you cast cost 1 less to cast, Soul Ring, Darksteel Ingot, and Sculpting Steel. So you just kind of use these to get more mana and get as much mana as possible in order to play your bigger artifacts over here that you can see that are like 8, 9 mana. And I really like using those for that purpose. So I'll talk about all these cards now. So, like, some of the better cards are, like, Sphinx of the Steel Wind. It has Pro Red and Pro Green. Here, I'll show it to you guys, in case you're not familiar. So, it's got Flying, First Strike, Vigilance, Lifelink, Pro Red and Green, and it's a 6/6 flyer, which just obviously fantastic. There's not a ton that your opponents can do about it. They pretty much have to counter it right away because it gets pretty ridiculous. And then there's also this card, Filigree Angel, which Filigree Angel, when it comes into play, you gain 3 life per artifact you control. I just like playing this late game after you played almost all your artifacts. You just gain so much life and your opponents are so far behind. It's ridiculous. And then the next one I'll talk about is Enigma Sphinx. It basically just has, its main thing that I use it for is Cascade, and then also when it's put in your graveyard, you put it in your library 3rd from the top. So that's obviously helpful. But I really like Cascading. It's a fun mechanic in Commander, and you never really know what you're going to get, but it's generally always something good and something that'll help you. And then I was talking about this card, if I can get it out, Magister Sphinx earlier. When it ETBs, target player's life total becomes 10. Obviously just kind of a win condition of itself, especially since this deck plays so many flyers, like Sphinxes and Angels. It's just absolutely fantastic. It's a really mean card. And then you got Master of Ethereum. His power and toughness are equal to the number of artifacts you control, so he's usually huge. And then he gives other artifacts you control +1/+1 for only 3 mana. That's really good. And then a lot of people really hate this card. Send Triplets. You basically, at your upkeep, you choose an opponent and you look at their hand and you can play cards from your hand. I really like playing this, especially when there's other blue decks, because it's really fun to just waste their cards and things like that. And also if they're playing white too, you can just like use kind of those removal over there, like Path to Exile, Swords to Plowshares, on things that they wouldn't usually use it on, or even on their own cards as well. It's just, this is a really mean card, and I really like to play it. And it also makes it so they can't cast spells that turn, so that really helps as well, especially when you're playing things. Okay, so Sphinx Sovereign. Flying 6/6, 9 mana, obviously pretty ridiculous, but sometimes you can get it out with Sharuum if it's in your graveyard for some reason, or anything like that. But at the end of your turn, you gain 3 life if it is untapped, otherwise each opponent loses 3 life. It's just kind of a nice ability to have. It lets you gain a little bit of life. It's not super great, but I mostly have it just because it is a 6/6 flyer. And then this guy pretty much just gets any artifact creature from your library into your hand, which is really good. So then, the next 2 cards I'll talk about. First is Master Transmuter. I love this card. It's 4 mana for a 1/2, and you just pay 1 island, tap it, you return an artifact to your hand, and then you put an artifact from your hand into play. So this is just great for, like, if you want to get high mana costing cards like Sphinx Sovereign or Darksteel Forge or something like that. If you want to get one of those cards out, but you don't have enough mana, you just bounce like something like Soul Ring or any other low mana costing permanent that you have, or artifact that you have out, and you just bounce that. You put down your 9-drop, and it's just like really easy to get those cards out. And I love comboing with it, especially if you copy it with things like Phyrexian Metamorph or Clone. It's just great. I also just use Phyrexian Metamorph sometimes to copy things like Gilded Lotus just to get even more mana. Yeah, it's just really fun. I also like to Phyrexian Metamorph or Clone Consecrated Sphinx just to draw even more cards. And then these are just some other artifacts right here that you can see. Shimmermer, artifacts you control have flash, Phyrexian Revoker, Staff of Nin, Sanctum Gargoyle, which just basically returns artifacts from your graveyard to your hand. Trading Post, which is kind of either allows you to draw cards, gain life, return artifacts or creatures from your graveyard to play, just kind of things like that. It's just a fun card to have. And then Darksteel Forge makes all artifacts indestructible that you control, so that's obviously very ridiculous. Yeah, so basically this deck, as you can kind of notice from the cards that I'm using, it really just focuses on trying to control the game state with all these counterspells, board wipes, and spot removal, while you slowly build up your artifact base, draw more cards with things like Consecrated Sphinx, Brainstorm, Fact or Fiction, look for answers, combo off with Sharuum and things like Venzer, or just use all these artifact creatures over here to just swing for a lot of damage. It's a very versatile deck. I'm still looking for more cards to get for it, and if you guys have any suggestions for this deck, I'm definitely very open to that. This deck is, I feel like I'm looking for more combos that I can use with Sharuum specifically, or just even more artifact combos that are better win conditions than what I currently have. This deck has been a work in progress for a long time, and I really like making this deck. It's really fun to play with, actually, even if you don't win all the time, which I win fairly often, but not all the time, and it's just a fun card, or a fun deck to play with. It's kind of fun to be in control of the game with all of these cards over here that you see. Sorry about that. And yeah, it's nice having like counter spells and things like that, so you know that you can play the cards that you want and just kind of control other people's board. So that's the deck tech for you guys. Thanks for watching. If you could just like or subscribe, post in the comments below on your suggestions for the deck, and just kind of any feedback you guys have is always welcome. Thanks so much.